Hello. Today, I just wanted to share with you some of the gear that I'm excited about and that I will mostly be using in the year 2023. First things first, I am drinking some coffee. This is the Santo Espresso from Maru Coffee Roasters, my favorite coffee roaster, based in LA. I've talked about them before. If you're not new to the channel, you've heard about it. If you are new to the channel, welcome. Thanks for coming. Thanks for showing up. I talk about coffee pretty often. This is their espresso roast that they use to make their coffee, espresso, and milk drinks in Los Angeles. It makes fantastic espresso, but it does pretty damn good in an AeroPress as well. All right, let's get started. I wanted to just focus on cameras for this episode, just because all of the other things that I use to make photography or video, there's a lot of ancillary accessories or lenses and other stuff like that, and it's easy to get kind of lost in the details. These cameras I want to talk about, it's kind of the anchor point of all the work that I do, and it's kind of the best place to start when it comes to talking about what I'm doing and why. The first camera I want to talk about on this list is the Fuji X-E3. To be fair, this camera does not belong to me. This belongs to my girlfriend, but I end up reaching for it a lot more than she does. This camera is part of Fujifilm's wonderful XE lineup, which I find to be often overlooked in favor of their X100, X Pro, and XT series of cameras. I feel that the general consensus is that these cameras are for prosumers and don't really feel as professional as the other cameras, but I actually would like to disagree with that point. I think that these cameras are very underrated, especially considering how popular the X100 series is right now, with the prices of the X100V just skyrocketing. Now, my girlfriend had this camera before we met. It was given to her by her brother, but I quickly fell in love with it because I realized that it shares the same sensor and processor as my beloved, sorely missed X Pro 2. I sold my X Pro 2 when I lived in Los Angeles in 2021, and it was a huge mistake. I really should not have sold that camera. That was with me on so many adventures. I had shot so much work with it. I had started this YouTube channel using that camera as the video camera to do all my videos. In a lapse of judgment, I ended up selling it. And yeah, I regret it. To my surprise, the X-E3 delivers a lot of that same image quality and a lot of the same feel and usefulness that I got out of the X Pro 2. So I've really been enjoying shooting this camera the last couple of months. You might have seen it in a couple of videos. I've talked about using it as a way to meter for like medium format, large format, whatever. And I do use it to do that quite often, but I also find it to be very easy to grab that camera when I'm on the go, going out to do something with friends, going to scout locations, going out just for the day, and I just want to have something to document my day. It's a really great camera. I have my Fuji 23mm f2 mounted to that camera pretty much permanently. It makes for a really great, incredibly compact little camera that I think is really overlooked. And I think that if you are really wanting a X100V or a similar camera, the X-E3, X-E2, even the X-E4 are all really great options. The next camera on this list is the Mamiya C330. I just picked this camera up. It's very new to me, and I have just been recently putting this camera through its paces, figuring out how to use it, figuring out what the upsides are to it and what the downsides are. And I have to say, so far, after putting about 10-12 rolls through it, it's quickly becoming my favorite medium format camera currently. You can change lenses. You can use the bellows for close focus. You can switch out the waist level viewfinder for an eye level viewfinder. It's just really modular and really nice to use. It's very similar in a lot of ways to using my RB67, but obviously it's a 6x6 format. A lot of people complain, or I've seen a lot of people complain about the Mamiya C series cameras as being really big and heavy. I can say it is bigger than the Rolleiflex camera that I own, but it is not much heavier. It's actually surprisingly maybe 100 grams heavier than the Rolleiflex, but carrying it around on a decent strap, I didn't notice it at all. It definitely did not put a strain on my shoulder like my RB67 does. So I'm really excited to use this camera a lot more, try out more of the lenses, and kind of fold it into my normal workflow in this coming year. Third on this list is actually a little bit of a curveball. It is a Fuji X-E1. Now, I talked about the X-E3 on number 1. Technically, it's the fourth iteration of the XE line. There's the XE1, XE2, XE2S, then the XE3. And the XE1 was really the camera that started it all. The XE1 has the same sensor as the Fuji X Pro 1. And people really, really love the X Pro 1 because that first generation sensor seems to have a very specific way of dealing with colors, and people really love the character of that sensor. I have to say, I agree. I think the sensor on the XE1 gives it this very special character that kind of can't really be replicated with the rest of the Fujifilm line of cameras, and it's just a little bit special. It is an older camera, so it's a little slower, but I don't necessarily mind that, being a film photographer first and foremost. The great thing about all Fuji interchangeable cameras is that you can adapt vintage lenses to those cameras very easily, and I find myself really enjoying adapting my different vintage Nikon camera lenses to the XE1, and it just works really, really great. It will autofocus with Fuji lenses, of course, and I will use the 23mm f2 on it quite a bit. It is slower to focus than the XE3, but I don't find it to be a problem, especially in good light. With the resurgence of popularity in cheaper digital point and shoots, I'm finding myself having a lot of fun revisiting the XE1 for a little bit less of image quality that I'm used to. At only 16 megapixels, it's a little bit of a step back from, say, the 23 megapixels of the XE3 or the X-T3, which I'm shooting right here. Being able to appreciate the technological advances that this camera had at the time that it was put out, it's kind of awesome, and I'm having a really good time playing with it. It's a really cool camera, and you can have them for very cheap, so it is actually a very, very viable option if you are looking for a cheap, compact digital camera for carrying around, having with you, doing some projects, or even just like a serious photographer who wants a little bit of special character from an older sensor. The last camera on this list is a little bit out there. It's another film camera that I don't think a lot of people had heard of before. I certainly hadn't until I had received it from a friend of mine, but it has turned into a really fun camera that I love picking up when I want a 35mm point and shoot, and that is the Ricoh FF90 Super. In the world of the Contax T2 and T3, as well as the Yashica T4, I'm actually surprised I haven't heard more about this camera. It is right up there as far as features and quality as those other cameras, but I've literally never heard of it. Now, Ricoh has a history of making really high quality, incredibly popular 35mm point and shoot cameras, the GR series being the chief example of that. And this camera is no exception when it comes to image quality and features. First, a 35mm 2.8 lens. Everyone's favorite point and shoots feature a 35 or 28mm 2.8 lens. That puts this camera right up there in T2, T3, and Yashica T4 territory. A couple of the things that really sold me on this camera were the ability to turn the flash off at a whim, which is exactly what I want in a point and shoot camera. I think all point and shoot cameras should have a flash, but you also should have the ability to turn it off if you don't want to use it. This camera allows you to do that, which I think is really awesome. It also has a +2 exposure compensation button for backlit subjects. So if you are shooting a portrait of somebody in front of a beautiful scene and the background is much brighter than the subject, you can actually bring up the exposure compensation 2 stops in order to make up for that backlit scene. I think it's a very smart, very well implemented feature. To round it out, it has a self timer and a very cool LCD screen that actually shows you a graphical representation of the film going through the camera, which I think is really cool and quirky. The styling of the camera is peak 80s futuristic technological coolness, and I think that we really lost God when we moved away from that kind of aesthetic. I think that we need to bring that back. Camera companies, I hope you're listening, bring back futuristic 80s tech design, please. Sony, I'm looking at you with the Walkman. The FF90 Super is made in Japan. It is a plastic body camera, but the plastic feels high quality. This particular model has held up really well since the 80s. There's no cracks or marks or anything wrong with it. So I think that's a testament to how durable it is. This was sent to me by my friend Jordan. He's also the one that gave me the Rolleiflex. What a great friend to have. He sent this to me along with some random film that he had. I gotta say, it's become one of my favorite 35mm point and shoots, and whenever I do want to bring a point and shoot out, my Olympus XA has some very, very stiff competition with the Ricoh FF90 Super. All right, that's going to wrap it up for this list. I want to thank you guys for watching. Now, this channel has no sponsors. We are completely supported by everybody at our Patreon page. If you want to support this channel, you can subscribe to the Patreon. The link is in the description. It's very inexpensive. There are multiple tiers. Every tier gets the same amount of access no matter what, so you can choose what level of contribution you want to make per month. And regardless of what that level of contribution is, whether it's $1 or $5, you will still get the same access to the Patreon and our Discord Discord. Again, thanks for watching. I appreciate you being here, and I hope you have a great day.